Today I would like to teach another theorem. This is the fourth major theorem from international. That is called that is called factor price equalization theorem. Factor prices equalization theorem. This theorem was proposed by or advocated by Camilton. Paul Camilton. Uh, Yesterday we have learned about an Excel Oakland theorem, HO theorem, or modern theory of international theorem, or factor abundance theorem. HO theorem is also called factor abundance theorem, factor endowment theorem, or HO theorem. So many names are there. So when HO theorem happens, when HO theorem exists between nations, between trading partners, then automatically factor prices among those two nations will be equalized over a period of time. This means that this means that the HO theorem, uh, the HO theorem is internally or externally causes factor prices equalization in both the trading nations. This theorem states that when the prices of output or goods are equalized between the countries as they move to free trade. ఫ్రీ ట్రేడ్కి వెళ్ళినప్పుడు ఆ రెండు నేషన్స్ మధ్య ఆ గూడ్స్ యొక్క ప్రైసెస్ అనేవి ఆటోమేటికల్ ఈక్వల్ అవుతాయి. దెన్ ద ప్రైసెస్ ఆఫ్ ఫ్యాక్టర్స్ ఆఫ్ ప్రొడక్షన్ ఇస్ ఆల్సో factors of production. I mean, here we have using labor and capital. The factors of production will also be equalized. Because of HO theorem, in both nations, the goods output or goods prices automatically equalized. Because of that only, factor prices also. Factors of production we are using here, labor and capital. HO theorem, I said that only labor and capital we are using. So the 2 by 2 by 2 model, that's why we are calling it HO theorem, we are calling it 2 by 2 by 2 model. Two nations, two factors of production, two commodities they are producing. So because of if HO theorem happens, automatically factor prices among these two nations will be equalized. Will be equalized. This implies that free trade will equalize. Free trade will equalize the wages of workers or rents of capital. Labor kitchen wages. Capital kitchen rent or interest rate, whatever it may be. Earned on capital, capital rent will be equalized. Will be equalized among the trading nations only. Trading nations only. This theorem derives from the assumptions of the HO model. This theory derives from the assumptions of the HO model, HO theorem, HO theorem, factor abundant theorem, modern theory of international trade, whatever it may be you can call. The most critical of which assumption is the two countries share the same production technology. In both nations, the production technology is same. We have the assumption in HO theory. So technology and that markets are perfectly competitive. We said that in a HO theorem, we said that production functions are same in both nations, and factor markets perfect competition, and product market, goods market, or commodity markets also perfectly competitive. So because this theorem is derived from those assumptions only. What are those two assumptions? The two countries have same production technology and perfect competition in factors market. In a perfectly competitive market, the returns of the factors of production depends on value of marginal productivity of that particular factor. For example, we can pay the laborer's rent, laborer's wage according to his marginal productivity, according to his MPL. So, according to that, we have to pay his uh, labor wages. So, in a perfectly competitive market, the return to any factor, labor we are paying according to his MPL, capital according to his MPK, marginal productivity of capital, like that we are paying in a real world. So, in a perfectly competitive market, the returns of factors of production depends on its value of marginal productivity of that particular factor. For example, labor ఎలా డిసైడ్ చేస్తారంటే అకార్డింగ్ టు హిస్ marginal productivity. Capital ఎలా డిసైడ్ చేస్తారంటే according to its marginal productivity. So in turn, it depends on the amount of labor being used. the amount of labor or capital being used as well as the amount of capital. Capital అవ్వచ్చు, లేబర్ అవ్వచ్చు, ఎంత యూజ్ చేస్తున్నామో దాన్ని బట్టి మార్జిన్ పర్సెంటేజ్ డిపెండ్ అవుతుంది. So as the amount of labor rises, as the amount of labor rises in an industry, the laborer's marginal productivity also rises. Finally, the value of the productivity depends upon the output prices. I mean, output means that particular good, the output price commanded by the goods market. For example, it is a free trade. I mean, it is an autarky position. There is no trade between nations. In an autarky position, the two countries faces different prices for the outputs or goods. అప్పుడు ట్రేడ్ జరగట్లేదు. ట్రేడ్ జరగకముందు ఎలా ఉంటుంది సిచ్యువేషన్ అంటే ట్రేడ్ జరగకముందు డిఫరెంట్ నేషన్స్ లో డిఫరెంట్ టైప్స్ ఆఫ్ గూడ్స్ కి డిఫరెంట్ టైప్స్ ఆఫ్ ప్రైసెస్ ఉంటాయి. ట్రేడ్ జరిగిన తర్వాత ఆటోమేటిక్గా గుడ్స్ ప్రైసెస్ రెండు నేషన్స్ లో ఈక్వల్ అయిపోతాయి. So, in an autarky position, for example, in an autarky position, two countries face different prices of outputs, different prices of outputs or goods, whatever it may be. The difference in the prices alone is sufficient to cause a deviation in wages and rents. అంతే కదా, ఇప్పుడు యాక్చువల్గా ఎప్పుడైతే ఒక గుడి యొక్క ప్రైస్ ఎక్కువ ఉందో ఆ నేషన్లో ఆ పర్టికులర్ ఫ్యాక్టరీ యూజ్ చేసిన వాటికి ఏవైతే ఫ్యాక్టరీస్ యూజ్ చేస్తారో వాటికి ఇచ్చే వేజెస్ ఆర్ రెంట్స్ వాట్ ఎవర్ ఇట్ మే బి, రివార్డ్స్ ఎక్కువగా ఉంటాయి. ప్రైసెస్ తక్కువగా ఉంటే వాళ్ళకి ఇచ్చే రివార్డ్స్ అనేవి తక్కువగా ఉంటాయి అనమాట. సో వేజెస్ అవ్వచ్చు, ఫ్యాక్టర్స్ రిటర్న్స్ ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో అవి దేని మీద డిపెండ్ అవుతుంటాయి అంటే ఫైనల్ ప్రొడక్ట్ ప్రైసెస్ మీద డిపెండ్ అవుతుంది అనమాట. బికాస్ ఇట్ ఎఫెక్ట్స్ ద మార్జినల్ ప్రొడక్టివిటీ ఆఫ్ దట్ పర్టికులర్ కమోడిటీ. In addition, in a variable proportion model, the difference in wages and rents also affects the capital labor ratios in each industry, which in turn affects the marginal products. This means that the various reasons the wages and rents rates are will differ between countries. Various reasons are there in the differences in the wages or rents in different nations before trade. ట్రేడ్ జరగకముందు డిఫరెంట్ ఫ్యాక్టర్స్ ఎఫెక్ట్ చేస్తాయి. ఆ ఫ్యాక్టర్స్కి ఇచ్చే రెంట్స్ అవ్వచ్చు, వేజెస్ అవ్వచ్చు, రివార్డ్స్ అవ్వచ్చు, ఎందుకు ఉన్నాయి అలా అంటే వాళ్ళ యొక్క హౌ మచ్ అమౌంట్ ఆఫ్ ఫ్యాక్టర్స్ యూజ్డ్ ఇన్ దట్ పర్టికులర్ కమోడిటీ, their marginal productivity, so many things it affects that factor rewards before autarky. I mean, before entering into a trade. So once free trade is allowed between the nations in outputs or output market, output prices will become equal in two nations. మీకు హెచ్ఓ మోడల్ అప్పుడు చెప్తాను. సో అవుట్పుట్ ప్రైసెస్ ఆ గూడ్స్ మార్కెట్ పర్ఫెక్ట్ కాంపిటేటివ్ ఉంటుంది కాబట్టి ఆటోమేటిక్గా ప్రైసెస్ అనేవి ఈక్వలైజ్ అవుతున్నాయి. So once free trade is allowed between these two nations, whatever how many nations are available in that. So here we have two nations only. In a world, in our assumptions, in a world there are two nations, two commodities, two factors they are using. So the free trade is allowed between these two nations. Output prices or goods prices will become equal in these two nations. Since the two countries share the same marginal productivity relationship, it follows that only one set of wages and rental rates can satisfy these relationships for a given set of output prices. Thus, free trade will equalize goods prices and wages and rentals and rewards also. So these rewards are the rents of labor, wages of labor or rents for capital. Since these two countries face the same wages and rental rates, they will also produce each good using the same capital labor ratio. Because the countries continue to have different quantities of factor in domains, they will produce different quantities of two goods. These results, in contrast with the these results, these results will automatically contrast with the other models. Earlier, we have discussed absolute advantage model, comparative advantage model. So, in those models, production technologies are assumed to be different in two countries. Absolute advantage theory, comparative advantage, and what are the other theorem, opportunity cost theory. So production technologies are different. We have an assumption, but here in HO theorem, production technology, homogeneous production technology, we have assumed. So as a result, when countries move to free trade, real wages remain different from each other. The country with higher production will have higher real wages. In other theorems, it will happen, but in HO theorem, we assumed that production functions are homogeneous in both nations for different goods in different nations. We have that assumption. Because of that HO theorem happened, automatically factor prices in different nations will become equalized. So this is the one of the main factor, one of the main advantage of HO theorem. This is the corollary of the HO theorem. When HO theorem happens, automatically the factor prices equalize. The factor prices equalized among nations. The factor price equalization theorem says that when the product prices are equalized, when the product prices are equalized between the countries, as they moved as they moved free trade as they moved free trade in HO model, then the prices of factors, I mean, factors means here we are using capital and labor only. So then the prices of factors automatically will be equalized between these two nations. So this factor price equalization theorem actually arises largely because of the assumption, earlier I said, the assumption that the two countries have the same production technology and a perfect competition in factor markets. Because of these two assumptions, which are in HO model, because of these two assumptions, the factor prices will become equalized in these two nations. So over a period of time will happen. Factor price equalization theorem in the HO model contrasts with the Ricardian model means earlier David Ricardo and Adam Smith models, comparative advantage theory, absolute advantage theory. The theorem కి ఇది different గా ఉంటుంది అన్నమాట. So this is the beauty of this theorem. So it alone, it won't alone happen. Then then it will happen with fact price equalization theorem. When HO theorem happens, then only that automatically fact prices will become among the trading nations. Actually, why it happens? There are two assumptions. There are two assumptions in HO model. What are they? Production functions are, production technologies are same for two commodities in two nations. We have that assumption. So, and in the earlier classes, we have discussed some 10 or 11 assumptions for HO theorem. And also, one of the beauteous assumption is perfect competition in both markets. What are those both markets? One is factor market, second one is commodity market, goods market. So, because of these two nations, over a period of time, what will happen? What will happen? The factor rewards we are paying for the inputs automatically act equalized in these two trading nations. So you might have understand this theorem, I think. So initially the HO theorem will happen. After that, over a period of time, this factor prices automatically will be equalized in these two nations. In these two nations. Here we have used 2 by 2 by 2 model in HO theorem. 2 by 2 by 2 means first two is two nations, second two is two factors, labor and capital value. And the second, third two is two goods they are producing. Whatever we assume, whatever maybe we have assumed here, paddy and wheat, paddy and computer, paddy and something. So one must be a labor abundant good, and the second one must be a capital abundant good. So over a period of time, the reward for labor will be equalized in these two nations. Suppose nation A and nation. And over a period of time, the reward for capital also being equalized in these two nations, nation A and nation B. So so HO theorem, when HO theorem happens, the one of the things was happened that by the Leontief paradox. So Leontief, an economist, was tested this HO theorem whether it is really happened in this in real world or not. So the HO theorem, when HO theorem tested by Leontief, it was they said he found that it was false. Why? Because when he tested for 100 years of data, I mean, he took 100 years of exports inputs data from the US. Surprisingly, he found that a capital abundant nation like US is exporting labor abundant commodities. లేబర్ యూజ్ చేసిన లేబర్ ప్రొడ్యూస్ చేసిన కమోడిటీస్ అంటే ఆ కమోడిటీస్ ఎక్కువ లేబర్ ప్రపోర్షన్ ఉంటుందంట లేబర్ రిచ్ కమోడిటీస్ దే ఆర్ ఎక్స్పోర్టింగ్ సర్ప్రైజింగ్లీ వాట్ దే వాట్ దే ఆర్ ఇంపోర్టింగ్ ఈజ్ capital or technology based goods they are importing. So this was the paradox for HO theorem. But the The other side of the coin was this factor price equalization theorem happened. This was first invented by Paul A. Samuelson. Paul A. Samuelson was advocated this factor price equalization theorem. He postulated that when HO theorem happens, when HO theorem happens between two nations, the over a period of time, over a period of time, because of two assumptions in HO theorem. What are those? Production technologies are homogeneous production functions in two nations. Our production technology is same in both nations because of that assumption. And another assumption is perfect competition in factor market and goods market also. Because of these two assumptions, automatically over a period of time, factor prices, factor rewards. What are we are paying for using labor and capital? Those are rewards. So these rewards will become equalized between these two nations over a period of time. Not immediately, over a period of time, it will be equalized. How it happen? We have already discussed over a period of time how it will happen. So it is a corollary of HO. So this is the fourth major international trade theorem. So earlier we have discussed absolute advantage theory, Ricardo. Absolute advantage theory by Adam Smith. Next, Ricardo's comparative advantage theory. Next, Habermas opportunity cost theory. Based on opportunity cost theory, we have discussed the comparative advantage theory also. And the next HO theorem, third one, major third international trade theory is HO theorem. Next, the fourth biggest or large theorem in international trade is factor price equalization theorem, which will be which was invented by Paul A. Samuelson. So I will send you again this material or write down the book name. Paul Krugman. Krugman's International Economics book is there. Krugman. Krugman. International Economics book is there. And earlier we have discussed one book in our first class. What is the book name? Swordstone. B.O. Swordstone. These two books are available in our library also. And uh, Swordstone and Paul Krugman, these two books are available in our library. Draw this book and get material from these books and verify these four theorems in those books. So tomorrow we will discuss those two theorems we have in our syllabus. Krabbe's availability theory and Lender's volume of rate theory, and then those two theorems we will discuss in one class only. If you have any doubts, please free to ask me in our WhatsApp group. Okay, thank you one and all.